If you're looking for nostalgia, you have come to the right place. This is the latest edition of Pro Wrestling Then and Now. I'm your host, Torch contributor Frank Peteani, and we are jumping back to 1995 and reviewing the first In Your House pay-per-view, the first WWF In Your House pay-per-view, the show that followed WrestleMania 11, and really the beginning of the more frequent pay-per-view cycle that we are still seeing today here 30 years later. So be a lot of fun to see the beginning stages of that. And doing that with me, as he has been doing all year, reviewing 95 WWF, longtime Torch contributor, Jon Mezzera. Jon, how are you today, my friend?
I am good. Thanks for having me again. It's been a fun year. And
let's see. We lost Jon here. Let's see if we can get him back. Stand by 1 second, folks. Oh, here we go. Yes,
I got kicked out.
Jon, you had to go right away, huh?
I suddenly got worried that I had lost internet. So luckily, I don't know what happened. It just said something went wrong, and luckily I was able to get back in. So.
Yeah, he's like, wait a minute, 95 WWF. Hold on a second, I'm out of here, folks.
What did I sign up for?
Oh man, the joys of live, being live on the airwaves here. All right, let me get a couple of quick housekeeping items out of the way before we get rolling. Of course, the last edition of this podcast, hope you had a chance to listen. It was ECW Hostile City Showdown. I did that with Todd Martin. Great show. Great to learn a lot of what was going on in ECW at the time from Todd. So certainly encourage you to go back. You can go back here on the pwtorch YouTube page and find that. When you go to the Torch YouTube page, there's cutouts for like Wade Keller's post shows, and there's a cutout for this that has all the previous editions of this. So check it out. And on the audio side, this is available as a VIP podcast. And let's see if I can bring this up correctly. Yeah, look at that. All right, I'm going to show this here real quick. So for VIP membership, go to pwtorch.com/govip. Again, that's pwtorch.com/govip. You can listen to The Fix with the aforementioned Todd Martin. That's a must listen every week. Everything with Rich Fan. A bunch of new shows have come in, Catching the Culture. You've got the Collision Cafe with Brian Zillum and Amin Ajini. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Amongst other things. And of course, this show, the audio-only version of this show is available on the Torch VIP side. So I encourage you to go ahead and do that. Speaking of, and of course, all the Wade Killer post shows are ad-free, and the Daily Cast shows are ad-free. And that brings me to the other housekeeping item. And let me get rid of this because we don't need it anymore. This past Sunday, I joined Brandon LeClaire, and we talked AEW Double or Nothing. A bit of a long show, 4.5 hours of AEW Shock of Shocks. But check that out. Sean Plichter joined us. We went about 2 hours, had a really fun discussion on Double or Nothing. So check that out. That is here on the Torch YouTube page, and that's a free podcast. But if you're VIP, that is all ads and plugs removed. All right. We got some people in the chat here. Welcome in. Feel free to comment. We'll get as many comments on the air. And of course, it's on. Have AEW ever had a short pay-per-view, to be honest? Nope. That's their thing. And it is what it is. So, all right, Jon. We are.
I will say real quick on that subject
ahead.
matter, because I see a lot of people complain about the length of their shows, and then a lot of people complaining about the people complaining and saying, hey, I paid $50. I want like 6 hours. And I guess one of the complaints against it is how late it goes on the East Coast, especially. So why not just start it at 4? slash seven.
Yeah.
4 for me, 7 for you. It's like, hey, that would, even if you're going the same lengths, at least they're not going well past midnight. It's just like a
Yeah.
little bit of a compromise. I'll just throw that out there. If Tony Khan is listening, he can
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
can
Right.
take some free advice and just start the show an hour earlier, and you're good to go. And moving back to Saturdays, and people seem to complain less about late Saturday nights than Sunday
Yeah.
nights. So
Yeah.
there you go. That's part of our now in the then and now.
That is part of our now. Well, you know, it ties in. I just want to say hello, Zach Minger. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Hello, Frank and John. How are you? Good, Zach. Feel free to post throughout the show. Um, you know, this is the beginning of that monthly pay-per-view cycle. I think 95, it's about 9 pay-per-views in total, or 10. I forget the count. But we're not too far away from the monthly cycle. So this is really, if this is the beginning of it.
Yeah.
And I know we talked about this a little bit, but you know, I was concerned back then that this would water down. Maybe not so much this time, but like a couple of years later when Raw went to like 2 hours and they were doing a monthly show. I'm like, it's going to kind of water down wrestling a little bit, you know, because like the way it had been before, you know, even up to, you know, this point, not too far before this point, where the syndicated shows, okay, you had Raw, which, you know, a little bit better than a syndicated show, but still had some squashes. And you had your 4 pay-per-views a year, 5 with King of the Ring. So it was still kind of like enough where you wanted more, but not too much. And now and I remember this being kind of cool, like, oh, okay, you know, in your house, you know, it's a little something, you know, won't be a long show. So, you know, I don't think I was too against it. But what about you? You know, what were you thinking in real time when they
Well,
introduced the in your house concept?
WCW was already doing monthly, right? They had been doing it, I think, monthly for a while, and I always thought that was overkill.
Yeah,
Not that I watched a lot of WCW, but you know, a little bit here and there, enough to be kind of aware of the big stars and what was going on and
yeah.
keeping track
There
of
were
some.
like, I want to say 9 because I still had the clashes,
Yeah.
and they did. What was it? Halloween Havoc. I'm just going back to October. Halloween Havoc. They did Starcade. Those were 2 months apart. I think they had a show with New Japan in between that.
Okay. So maybe
And
it
then,
wasn't quite. It seemed that there was definitely
but it
more.
was frequent. It was more frequent.
Yeah. And so when WWE started doing it, it was kind of the same thing. It was just like, okay, but like this first In Your House was like, you know, less than 2 hours. It was $15, I think, at the time when the other ones
Yeah,
were 30. So it was like, well, at least it's a lower price point. It's, you know, not, but then it doesn't take them long until they're doing it every month. Then they're back to $30 and 3 hours.
yeah,
You know, corporate greed is always going to get you in the end, and you can't really, you know, blame them if you're going to get X amount for a third hour of Raw. It sucks, but they're going to take X amount for the third hour. If we can get a second hour of this, or, you know, push an extra pay-per-view in, because at some point, I mean, they started doing them where it was like they do one from London that was only in England, and then
yeah,
they started, and it was some point, and then of course you get the now you get the extra ones for a while with the Saudi Arabia shows. At some point, I think when they went to brand split pay-per-views, right? It was
yeah,
like, oh, well, now we're gonna add a couple. I think one year they did 14, and that was not including like the any extra ones in like England or anything else. So it
yeah,
just it like you said, it's the beginning of it. At the time, I was a little worried because, as I said, kind of as an outside observer of WCW, I kind of rolled my eyes like another pay-per-view, another pay-per-view.
yeah.
And it's like, oh. And I mean, I don't know, we didn't necessarily know how frequently at the time they were going to be doing these in your houses. And I kind of, as you and I were embarking on this 95 journey, I was like, well, let's see, they do the one, and then I think they maybe did one in September, and I'm like looking, I'm like, oh wait, they do one like almost every month. It went a
Yeah,
little, it went a little more frequently than I remembered. I would have thought there were a few fewer that first year, but
Yeah.
that's 30 years of distance.
Right, right. And Wade talks about this in his Below the Bottom Line article, in the edition of his newsletters that covered this, which, by the way, is another perk of your VIP membership. You have access to all these old newsletters. And he talks about concerns about events not feeling big anymore, especially when you're doing them more frequent. And he also talks about connecting sort of, one event to the next. Are you going to have sort of a flow where, what happens on this show is tied into what happens on the next show? And I guess it does here with the King of the Ring pay-per-view, as we will talk about when we go through some of these matches. But, they also do some stuff to kind of, like you start seeing the garbage finishes and interferences and stuff like that. And, he goes into that as well. And, we have a main event to talk about this. So we'll, not get too into that right now. Zahn in the chat, it's just killing the house show idea with more pay-per-views. I mean, that's, I always kind of saw the monthly pay-per-view as the local house show. Because that's really, if you think about it, you go back to, let's pick a year, 1987, or let's go back a year before that, before like Survivor Series. I mean, you watch the syndicated stuff, okay? Maybe you watch TNT, that show, whatever. And then to see the good matches, you had to go to your local arena.
Right. And then they had Saturday Night's Main Event, but those were the matches that they had already run at the house shows.
Correct.
So for the people who weren't going to the house shows, you had a chance to see some of these, matches, but they weren't burning those matches out from a, house show perspective. So that's part of it too, is by this time you're kind of done with the SNME. So it's like,
yeah.
And they weren't monthly. They were like every 3 months or whatever it was.
And if you think about it, it was like a little pay-per-view. If you think about it, right? Because it started out, it was pretty frequent with Saturday Night's Main Event, and which, by the way, I've reviewed episodes 1 through 4 so far. And then it kind of settled into seasonal after that, I think around 86. But that was kind of like your pay-per-view almost.
Right. And that was as a kid starting to watch in 88. And we literally had no pay-per-view capability in my city with our little rinky-dink cable company. So like that was what we had to look forward to the most, was Saturday Night's Main Event, because you're going to see, these matches you couldn't see a SummerSlam or a WrestleMania, whatever. So that was always a big thing to look forward to. And but as time goes by, now you're getting more pay-per-views taking that spot, and as you said, I mean, ultimately killing maybe a little strong, but cutting into the house show business.
Yeah, it resets. I think the fairest thing to say is it resets the industry after a while. It resets sort of how TV is laid out. It resets how pay-per-views are laid out. You know what I mean? The more frequent cycle.
Yeah.
It's an adjustment. So
yeah.
And as I said, there's actually 2 matches that we'll really talk about here. The finishes were really puzzling, especially with the beginning of the more frequent cycle. The other topic, real quick, and then we'll get into the show, John. We were kind of touching on it when we did WrestleMania 11, but the babyface and heel side of the ledger in '95, which I think you and I agreed was a little bizarre, the way things had shaken out up until this point. You got people like Diesel, obviously your champion. Shawn Michaels had turned the whole, you don't give me the night off angle. Bam Bam Bigelow's now a babyface. Bret Hart, Undertaker, Razor Ramon, 1, 2, 3 Kid. Hey, if you want to get into, British Bulldog and Lex Luger, technically tag wrestlers, but they're not really, I mean, they're the Allied Powers, but they're still, they're not purely tag guys.
Sure.
And then your tertiary guys, your Adam Bombs, your Bob Hollies, the former Very Dangerous Quang who comes in on this show.
You gotta love the dangerous Quang.
Savio Vic. And then, your heel side, I mean, you look at it, it's basically the $1 Million Corporation, right? You've got Sid, Tatanka, King Kong Bundy, who's not long for the promotion. Neither is IRS. Kama.
Neither is Ted DiBiase at this point.
No, he's not too far away from being Gonzo.
A year or so, maybe.
And then Mabel, Hakushi, Jerry Lawler. I mean, it's a really unbalanced ledger. And I'm just curious what you think maybe the strategy was. I mean, the only thing I could think of was maybe with Diesel being the champ, they didn't want a lot of strength on the heel side. They wanted guys that, if they lined them up for Diesel as challengers, he could beat them, because then if you're lining up, like, let's say Razor turned, it puts them in a tough spot. They didn't turn Luger, obviously. I mean, they could have if they wanted to. Bigelow had already faced Diesel. But yeah, just what are your thoughts? Just kind of on the unbalance, the balance of the heels and the babyface around this time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. It's hard to know. Did they see certain people and lose faith in them? Did they think Bob Backlund would be more of a regular guy still at this point? Did they, we've talked multiple times on the show going back to King of the Ring last year about Vince McMahon never ever fully buying into Owen as a singles, and how many tag team partners Owen had. And here we'll get to the match, but him teaming with Yokozuna, as we discussed at WrestleMania. Well, you can't tell me that Owen wouldn't have had value as a singles heel. Yoko got too big, and we talked about it last time, so we don't need to go over it all, but this was the best use you could use for him. So absolutely. Some of it is maybe circumstances. Shawn Michaels was an audible to turn after WrestleMania. That was not seemingly a long-term plan, but the way he was getting reactions, it just made sense. So there might have been just some of those, circumstances that they hadn't foreseen, or Vince McMahon losing interest or losing faith in particular heels. They're going to turn Mabel, or they've turned Mabel. They're going to try to do a run with Mabel. We know we'll get more to that later, and even more at the King of the Ring, but that, isn't going to go well. But it was at least a killer, quote, killer monster heel type guy that Vince always, loved. So,
like, the thing is, I'm looking at this babyface side, right? And I'm like, who do I turn? Like, to balance this out, if I'm playing fantasy, wrestling in real time, and I don't have the benefit of 30 years of hindsight, who am I turning? I mean,
well, the kid gets turned pretty soon, right? 1, 2, 3 kid gets turned pretty.
Kid's a little bit later in the year,
but it's coming up. I can't remember exactly when it happens, but I'm like, I know it's got to be coming up.
Kid is around Survivor Series because he's part of that. He's part of that very underappreciated opening match with Marty Jannetty. I think it's Jannetty, Hakushi. I forget who else was on the team. The underdogs against, I think it was $1 Million Corporation. The Kid. I got to look up. I did that show with Tyler a few years ago. But it's really underrated. It's a really underappreciated match. But that's like, in that match, Razor comes out. He's not involved, but he comes out to go after the 1-3 kid. So there's a real, like, genuine, authentic feud going on. But, I know Bulldog, he turns, but he's later in the year. And I mean, that never, Bulldog's turn, we'll get to that later in the year. I mean, that was an odd spin for me. I mean, the only one, but unfortunately the ship had sailed on it, was Luger. I mean, I'm not turning Brett. I mean, you can make the argument for it, but Undertaker. I mean, they had turned Bigelow, so they're not doing that.
Uh,
I mean, is Razor, because like Razor at this point, he had his time as the IC champ. He had his sort of, year and a half, I guess.
yeah.
That was the only other one I thought of. But it
Yeah, he
wasn't
could.
like they should have done it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I mean, he could get growing frustration with his never-ending Jeff Jarrett feud, and you could somehow
uh,
have told a story around that. But yeah, it would have been impossible because it had been a while for him. Luger certainly would have made sense, but it seems like they had already missed the boat on that.
and the reactions for him as a face, it was a dead fish in the crowd. So it was just like, even if he turned,
It's two. You missed it.
you missed it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it kind of like, I guess the moral of the story is the heel and baby face side, while unbalanced, is probably where it needed to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So all right, John, with that said, let's go In Your House. The show takes place, we're a little past the 30-year anniversary of it. It's May 14th, 1995, in the Onondaga County War Memorial in Syracuse, New York. And Greg Parks will appreciate this. This is in Western New York, not upstate New York, Western New York. That is a thing for people that live in Western New York. They hate when us Long Islanders call it upstate New York. So, there you go. It is now it is now known as Upstate Medical Center University Arena. So, there goes that argument.
There goes that.
There goes that argument out the window. So I tried, guys. Anyway, many different Syracuse American Hockey League teams. It had an all-star game back in an NBA All-Star game in 1961. My God. And concerts by Queen, Kiss, Bruce Springsteen, Aerosmith, and also hosted an episode of Raw in 1998. So a little bit of history of the arena. According to Wikipedia, around 7,000 in attendance. Your announcers are Vince McMahon and Doc Hendricks, formerly known as Michael P.S. Hayes of the Freebirds. I don't know if this is a good time to get into it, but Doc's commentary was a lot more pleasant than I remembered. I don't remember like what I thought, but like at one point in the tag match, he's actually offering really good insight. I know we'll talk about it. Maybe this is a little early to bring it up, but like it wasn't as egregious or as bad as I remembered it.
I don't know. I felt it was pretty bad. So I didn't. I wasn't, enjoying it too much. At one point, I can't remember. I'm trying to remember which match it was, and I looked in my notes, but I unfortunately did not note it. But at one point, he said something that clearly annoyed Vince, but in a way that I was happy about, because it was like he used a word, and Vince kind of, I don't know, corrected him or something. I wish I had written it down, but there was something that he said that was like, whether he actually used the name of a move instead of calling it a maneuver, but he said maneuver a lot. We had kind of texted about
he
this.
had kind of assimilated. Yeah,
he assimilated the
into
maneuver
that.
from Vince.
I just remember I just watching this, and maybe it's just this show. And please, I'm not campaigning for Doc Hendricks being a top commentator of all time. Believe me, this show specifically did not bother me.
And I think probably at the time, I probably liked it more live as a 15-year-old than maybe I'm just jaded, and I've gotten to the point where I'm so annoyed by the heel commentators as a trope, where it's just like, Bobby Heenan was so funny doing it.
Yeah.
But it gets to a point where you're just like, and I think you and I have talked in the past, not in this current cycle, but going back to some of the other shows that we did a few years ago with the heel Michael Cole.
Oh my God.
And how bad that was. And it kind of killed the concept of the heel announcer for me. Not that it wasn't like already dying, but just the heel for the sake of being a heel. And part of it too is there's been so many really weak play-by-play guys
Hmm.
in strong voiced heel commentators where there's not enough pushback from the babyface commentator
Yeah.
that you're watching and you get to that point where like, why should I boo the heels? Because they're smart. They're doing all the right things.
We talked
And
about that a
I think
lot.
that balance, Vince McMahon, for all his faults as an announcer or whatever, he was always going to push back and be the more strong voice pushing for the baby face. And over time, that balance went out. So when I go back and watch something like this and I hear just those overtly heel commentators like, Doc Hayes or, any of them from that era, it's like, oh, it's just I cringe a little, even
Yeah.
if, and there were some times when he actually did some more 50-50 commentary in this show, more straight up analysis of a move or of the match, which was good, but it's hard for me to, you know,
Yeah.
overlook the more overt just healing constantly.
Yeah. And Sean is our buddy Sean Plichter here. Weirdly enough, I always thought Vince is a pretty good announcer. And then his other
He wasn't, but no, it's fine.
yeah, I don't know. Vince just kind of grated on me. And heels could actually get heat because Vince pushed back on it. I think that's fair.
Yeah,
If we're not,
sure.
regardless of what we thought of Vince, as an announcer. And
Vince was going to tell the stories.
Yeah.
He was going to tell the stories, but he wasn't going to call the match in what we would call a sports-like way.
Oh yeah.
So,
and that was purpose. That was purposeful. It's
but
so
when you, oh, for sure. But when you get to like Jim Ross in his prime, he could do both.
Yeah.
He could call the match in a way that got you really into that match, but also while pushing back against Jerry Lawler and his heel stuff,
Yeah.
advancing the storylines. He could do it all. And so I know it's unfair necessarily. If you think he's the greatest of all time, then it's unfair to compare anyone to the GOAT, right? But at the
Yeah.
same time, he's kind of the measuring stick. And, that's where you were. Vince is going to push the story and say, what a maneuver 17 times a match. Because he didn't care about the actual wrestling as much.
Zahn, Vince sounds like a morning DJ. that's not bad. That's not a bad comparison. All right, let's get to the show. The dark matches. Jean-Pierre Lafitte, who is the former one half of the Pierre of the Quebecers. Took me a second. Pierre of the Quebecers beats Bob Holly. Owen Hart and the British Bulldog wrestled to a draw in a King of the Ring qualifying match. I would have rather seen that on the pay-per-view than what we got.
But why a draw on a dark match for a King of the Ring qualifying match? That just makes no sense. I'm really curious to see like what, and I don't remember like ultimately what happened with any of them, but it's weird.
Yeah, well, we got the bracket to revisit for King of the Ring. Bam Bam Bigelow, his former $1 Million Corporation mate Tatanka, and The Undertaker beats his buddy Charles Wright at the time, So those are your dark matches. All right. At the onset of the show, we get Vince McMahon and Doc Hendricks introducing the show. They talk about the house giveaway, which is a big hook for this. Doc says that he has golfing rights in Orlando, so whoever wins the house has to let Doc Hendricks play golf there. So,
did you try to win the house, Frank?
I did not try to win the house. Maybe I should have. Hey, it would have worked. I mean, I'm working for JetBlue. We have an Orlando base, so training is down here. It would have worked.
There you go. I did not either, so
it would have worked. Oh well.
Yeah.
We get a pre-match interview with Bret Hart, talking about his upcoming match with Hakushi. And by the way, they go heavy throughout the show on this taking place on Mother's Day. So there's a lot of discussion of, it being that Bret dedicates the match to his mother. And I guess the production team didn't talk to the interview team because they played Bret's music as he's talking. So a rare production gaffe on WWF. But it is 1995. It's not quite the TKO WWE of 2025 here, folks.
Yeah.
So. And your opening match, the first In Your House match, a trivia question. Bret the Hitman Hart taking on Hakushi. So this is really more a feeder match for the Bret Hart-Jerry Lawler feud, which got reignited, and we see the payoff at King of the Ring for that. Hakushi had taken exception to Bret being honored by the Japanese media, and Jerry was in Hakushi's ear telling him that he was a racist. On a segment on Superstars, Bret's being honored and Hakushi attacks him, so that's the setup for this match, which takes 14 and a half minutes or so. Your winner, as expected, Bret Hart. Wade rates this 3 3/4. Quote, a very good opener. I'm in Wade's camp on this, John. I thought it was a really good match. You and I talked about it offline. It took a little bit to get going.
Yeah, there were a couple off spots real early, but once they got it going, it went.
Yeah, the second half was definitely a lot better, and a lot of this was built around Shinja, the manager of Hakushi, interfering. Shinja, very obviously Sato from the Orient Express. If you were watching the WWF 5 years prior, I mean, they just couldn't hide. He's in this like white face paint, and it's like, yeah, we know that's Sato. So thanks for playing, Vince. Your finish of this match, and then I'll turn it over to you. So Bret suplexes Hakushi to the outside. They work their way back in. Hakushi reverses a suplex. He tries a German, but then Bret reverses it to a leverage pin. Your thoughts on Bret versus Hakushi?
Yeah, I mean, I think clear match of the night. I think, good showing that, they had something in Hakushi that they probably never fully exploited as well as they could have, which is a shame.
Mm-hmm.
He's a really good worker. There was a point where Bret started to go for the sharpshooter after his, traditional, 5 moves of doom.
Bret sequence, yeah.
And I think did Shinja get up on the ring apron maybe and distract him? And my thought at the time, or watching it, not at the time, watching it now, was if this were a Raw or a Superstars match, he puts the sharpshooter on, it's the end of the match. But, that's kind of the difference. Now we're going to extend it out. We're going to have more back and forth. And, we're going to, I think, protect Hakushi a little bit with the roll-up finish. He doesn't, submit to the sharpshooter. So it's protecting him a little bit and leaving open for later on to continue, his part in the story. So overall, I think, like I said, a few little clunky spots. I did have a note here. I'm trying to remember the exact context. I think McMahon said something about, excuse me. I think Doc said something about one of Helen Hunt's sons, and McMahon said something about Brett. And he's like, no, I was talking about Owen. She has 2 sons, And I was like, actually, she has about 6 sons.
I was going to say Bruce, Keith, Wayne.
I thought it was just kind of a funny little line. And then the other thing I thought was really funny was after Brett won, they shut off fireworks. And I
was like right away. It was like, what?
I wrote in my notes, fireworks question mark for, a good but opening preliminary match that has, it's not like a title match. It's not like a number 1 contenders match. It's just, It's not a main event. It's an opening match. Why are we getting fireworks? So that was a little amusing, but overall, not much bad to say about what was a A real good match between these two.
And we should note that Jerry Lawler was watching on in the back.
Hmm.
So because they had on television, the part of the story was Jerry thought that Brett was avoiding him, and Brett said, "No, I'm not. I'll take on both of you on the
Right.
paper. How's that?" So,
Well, and then you
uh,
get the Brett faking the knee injury,
yes,
which would play well into the little backstage bits with Lawler before their match. That all worked, I think, pretty well for him to sell. He had hurt his knee in this match and making him vulnerable to Lawler, who then insisted that the match happen right away, which
right,
was great heel work from Lawler. Just
yeah.
I want to take advantage of it. Um, so
That's the
all
thing
that
about
worked well.
that's the thing about the Brett Jerry feud. I mean, I think it brought out. I heard this on another podcast. It brought out that personal side of Brett because up until I mean, you go back to because this goes back to '93.
Hmm.
Up until that point, you really hadn't had that personal issue in any feud involving Brett. I
Right.
mean, he had great matches, and he had that great match against Mr. Perfect. But you really hadn't seen that personal side, and you see it, and I think it's when Brett gets nasty, I think that's the best Brett.
Yeah.
97 proves that. Okay.
Right.
But when you start to see that, you go to the SummerSlam match with Jerry, I think it brings out that side. And I mean, I'm convinced that Vince at SummerSlam 93 figured out, shit, Brett's my guy, not Luger.
Sure.
Or at least the thought was in his head at the end of the night because he's the most over guy, not the guy challenging for the WWF Championship.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
that's the one thing about the Jerry feud, and it's really kind of carrying I mean, Diesel and Sid. There's not much not much of a personal issue between those two. Razor and Jarrett, really not.
Well, and it
So
was kind of at the tail end, I think, at this point of what would just kind of started to drag by this point. So
yeah,
yeah, you needed something more, exciting or whatever. But and obviously Owens came in between and
yeah.
really
You're kind
got
of done
Brett
with the Brett Owen. You can't do Brett Owen anymore. I mean, they're done.
right.
I mean, they do some tags. I mean, they're still involved, but not the way they were the previous year. You brought something up with Hakushi, and I have in my notes to ask, did Hakushi go to the wrong promotion? Because, like, watching ECW, they're doing the Dean Malenko Eddie Guerrero feud, and so they're starting to infuse the good wrestling, not just the hardcore stuff.
Mm,
They're starting to infuse that, and I mean, Bischoff. I think at this point was starting to introduce it. We're not too far away from the luchadors coming in. Not that Hakushi's a luchador, but those quality
the
opening matches,
cruiserweights, the
the
cruiserweights.
cruiserweights. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, Hakushi might have been a perfect fit, for WCW. Maybe not this year, but like the following year when he starts introducing that.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, I think at this time it's any work rate guy, especially I hate, to say it, but a foreigner who doesn't speak English, who's going to have a manager, um, you're playing into stereotypes with Vince. Not that the
Oh yeah,
others didn't do it.
yeah,
Let's not just say Vince was the only one who ever played into racial stereotypes, but you knew it was bad there. And his work rate is not going to be as appreciated as it would be with Paul Heyman in ECW or even Bischoff in WCW, especially like you said, a year or so later. So I think it's a really good point that um, and that you're going to get to those days in ECW where you've got your Jerichos and your Mysterios and or maybe they were already there in '95. I forget all the timelines. But
I
anyways,
forget. I think Ray's a little bit later. Benoit's already there.
yeah. And
Um,
obviously they didn't last long because they ultimately go to WCW, but
yeah,
you've got that window.
mhm,
And so yeah, I think you're going to be more appreciated by the fans also
yeah,
than the WWF fans at the time. So yeah, I think he was in the wrong place and or the wrong time. You could see him working at other times in WWF, WWE later, um, when somebody would have when they were pushing more work rate than they did
Yeah.
certainly in '95. So the timing and the company just unfortunately for him did not mesh.
Because you brought up the point of him being Japanese. Like, I feel like any Japanese wrestler that was coming into the promotion around that time, Vince knocked it over your head that he was Japanese. Like, I don't, I could look at the guy and I could figure it out. Like, I don't need
Right.
you to call him the modern day kamikaze and he eats sushi and all this other. Like, I got it, Vince. It's like he was always focused on that instead of highlighting what he could do. I mean, you look at his bump card in '95, he's basically losing to Brett on all the houses.
Right.
I
And
mean,
I'm sure were some really good matches.
I'm sure they were really good. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, he's working Adam Bomb. He's beating Adam Bomb, but everybody was beating Adam Bomb, so that didn't matter. He's beating fucking Doink the Clown. All right. So, what the hell does that what the hell does that matter? And I thought I put it in my notes here. Was it him? Somebody beats both of the Hardy Boys. Let's see here. I thought I put that in here. Oh my God. Okay. Well, I think he works both Matt and Jeff, as they were rising up. So, I mean, he's not beating anybody. So clearly he's there to be a jobber. And that's what the work rate guys were there for, were to do jobs.
Right. And then ultimately they're gonna do the Barry Horowitz bit, turn him babyface as a comedy act.
Yeah.
Because, oh look, the Japanese guy is trying to learn English, or oh look, he's gonna eat a hamburger instead of sushi. I mean, maybe I'm projecting, but I feel like those things happen.
No,
It's been a long time.
And as a matter of fact, Barry's on that team with Hakushi.
There you go.
Barry's
Well,
on
I know I remember for sure they had a team, but I'm trying to remember if I'm right about some of him trying to teach him how to be an American, or if I'm making that up in my mind 29 years later. But
it might or might not have happened, but you thinking about it is fair, because it has happened.
Right.
I mean, remember they tried to civilize the head shrinkers by putting boots on them and stuff.
Right.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
But all right, let's go on to other things here. You got Todd Pettengill in the back with Superstar Hotline. He's talking to Stan Lane and Alundra Blaze. Jerry Lawler shows up. Todd Pettengill says that Bret Hart is on his way. Jerry takes out his beeper. All right, we had beepers in 1995, folks. No cell phones. Well, we had cell phones, but you had to have like a credit history and stuff. And says that his mom just beeped him, so he had to go. Then we see Stephanie Wyand, one of the interviewers at the time, by the house set, showing all the entries. They show the armored truck bringing all the entries earlier in the day. So really playing up this house giveaway. And then they talk to the 1-2-3 kid on the phone. No pick, though. Another fail by the production team. Again, 1995 WWF, not the 2025 TKO version, kids. And says he wishes he could be there. We get an inset promo with Razor Ramon, I believe during the introductions of Jeff Jarrett and the Roadie. Says that Kid is not letting him down, and he'll take care of business with Jarrett and the Roadie. This is a bizarre setup here. So I don't know what we should talk about first. First, let's get the backstory out of the way. So this was supposed to be a tag match with Kid and Razor, but Kid had got hurt on Raw. So they end up turning it into a handicap match. Now, the feud goes back to the Rumble, the Royal Rumble. You and I covered that, where Jarrett had beaten Razor for the Intercontinental Championship, and then he retained at WrestleMania via Razor winning via DQ. As far as the match is concerned, 3.25 stars, another good bout that told a consistent story. Having Jarrett lose cleanly showed booking guts, rather than going with a DQ finish or having Roadie, the assumed weaker link of the team, take the fall. But I want to push back on that a little bit, because Wade then talks about this in his Below the Bottom line. If you're heel side is so weak. Why are you beating your Intercontinental Champion in a handicap match, no less, and having him take the pin? Like, why do this in the first place? I mean, the heat really is between him and Rhodey, right?
Yeah, I think.
It really isn't the point, but the point is you're beating your IC champ.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can see it both ways. In part because at some point Razor needed the win, and if he had lost again, it's like, yeah, it's not really working.
Right. And
It's
Azan
kind
talks
of
about to set up a rematch. You finish your point because then I'll get to what happens here in a couple of days.
sure. Yeah, I think there would have been more groan-inducing kind of moment for, well, we saw it at Rumble and he gets screwed by cheating. We saw it at WrestleMania, he gets screwed by cheating. Even if
Right.
it's not cheating here, he's gets screwed by the fact that it's a handicap match. And if they had gone and Jarrett gets the win, there would have been some shenanigans where, Rhodey cheats from the outside or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I think from that standpoint, I I agree with the decision. Honestly, I couldn't remember what happened. And
Yeah.
I was surprised Razor won because I just said, of course, there's going to be Rhodey shenanigans again,
Yeah.
and Jarrett's going to win again. So I was actually, as a 30-year later fan, and I'm guessing this was probably my mindset at the time, was, oh, thank God they didn't just do more shitty shenanigans with the Road Dog and or the future Road Dog. And
Yeah.
so from that standpoint, I get what you're saying about the IC title, protecting the title. I get what you're saying about that and the heel babyface dynamic. But overall, I would probably stick with what they did.
Well, I'm curious, and I was looking for it in Wade's newsletter, and I couldn't find the answer. But here's the craziness of this. So 5 days after this show, Razor beats Jarrett in a ladder match in Quebec for the Intercontinental Championship
At a house show.
at a house show.
Huh.
Well, that's not all, folks. There's more. 2 days later, Jarrett gets the title back. So what I'm thinking is this is your first In Your House pay-per-view. You're going to beat Jarrett anyway. You want Razor to get his win. Why not just do the ladder match on the pay-per-view? I mean, if you want to fling the title around, right? You have Razor win it, have Jarrett win it back on the house show.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you certainly could have gone that route. I guess I don't know, was the kid injury real or was it all storyline? It was a
No, it's
real
real.
injury.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, they had the match, already set up before the injury. So maybe they didn't want to switch it up entirely. And, we talked about killing the house show business. I always remember every once in a while you tune in to like Raw back in the day, and there would be like men on a mission were suddenly tag team champions because they
Yeah.
beat the Quebecers at a house show or something.
Yep.
And I always felt that WWE didn't do enough of that. And as time went on, they did less and less of it.
Yeah.
So it always served as a good advertisement for those house shows that you might actually see a title change. So I can't
Yeah.
fault them, for doing that. I think it's weird to go back to it 2 days later. Like, why not have one Raw where Razor's the champion? I don't know. Um,
Or how about this? When Kid gets hurt, I mean, I know this is all in hindsight. We have the benefit of, knowing what took place.
sure.
Kid gets hurt. Now it's a handicap match. Well, if Razor wins the match, he's the Intercontinental Champion.
Yeah, you could have done that.
And like I said, you're flipping the title around anyway, so you just flip it back on a house show.
Sure. Yeah, that's certainly a possibility.
And that establishes, you're in your house. That establishes that something could happen, something big could happen on these pay-per-views. Because we really, honestly, on this show, which I enjoyed, by the way, but you don't really get anything.
Right.
What do you get from the show?
Build to the next one. Yeah.
I mean, And you get Savio Vega showing up, right? And that was another thought too. Well, if Kid's hurt and Savio Vega's ready to go, why not make him a surprise tag team partner?
Well, yeah, you could have done that. He hadn't been established, though, at that point. They also had an Aldo Montoya run in before
Yes.
Savio Vegas to save the day, the Portuguese man of war. Um,
Which in real time I didn't realize he was one of the Click Boys.
oh, sure, yeah. And I didn't realize he was actually of Portuguese descent. So I looked it up at some point. I remember, thinking about it, I was like, is Justin Credible really Portuguese, or was that just total BS? But apparently he was. His parents, I think I read, came from Portugal, and he was born here. But anyways,
Yeah.
you know, uh, yeah, I think your Intercontinental title in the handicap match idea works. If they're going to do that, though, I guarantee you it's Rhodey taking the loss. But either way, you get a title change. And like you said, Hakushi Brett doesn't solve the issue.
No.
Hakushi, we'll get to Brett. Um, Lawler doesn't solve the issue. Main event doesn't solve the issue. So everything is just revolving and moving
Yeah.
on to King of the Ring, where maybe some of the stuff gets resolved, maybe it doesn't, and you got to go on to SummerSlam.
Yeah. And that's one of Wade's concerns is connect, like you do this pay-per-view and you give these endings. I mean, we get the clean ending in the Brett Hakushi match. We get the clean ending here. We don't get any shenanigans. And actually we get clean endings in the next two matches, and then we get into the shenanigans. So it's like, ask people to pay $14.95 to get that. You don't know yet at this point. You don't know what's coming. So it's like, to establish that, we're not going to give you clean finishes. We're going to give you shenanigans instead. Well, are people going to want to continue to pay money for that? Now, again,
Right.
benefit of hindsight, 30 years of history, pay-per-view industry is still around, and we're still doing garbage finishes. In fact, we're doing even more these days,
100%. Yeah. And the frequency, you don't have those shows. They didn't have SmackDown yet. Raw wasn't as long, right? So you
Right.
didn't have as much time to build as you had before. So you almost had to use each pay-per-view in between, especially these In Your House ones in those early days, as a way of building, because how else are you going to get there? You don't
Yeah.
have the TV time to build, so you have to do these kind of things, which, I mean, not, but again, they put themselves in that position. It wasn't like outside forces.
No.
It's like self-fulfilling prophecy then
Right.
at that point.
Right. Self-fulfilling prophecy, self-inflicted gunshot wound. As far as the match is concerned, I mean, I thought the match was fine. I didn't think it was terribly noteworthy. Rhodey, like, they made it seem like Rhodey hadn't worked before, but meanwhile, the Rhodey had worked in WCW and Smoky Mountain. So he had a bit of a history.
Those things didn't exist.
There's no wrestling there. By the way, did I hear Doc correctly say that this was the first handicap match on a pay-per-view?
I missed it if he did, so I don't know.
I thought he said it, and then my note says SummerSlam 1991.
What was that? You'll have to remind me.
Hogan and Warrior against Slaughter.
It was a 3-on-2.
Yeah. So maybe it was the first handicap, because I don't recall a singles.
It could have been the first 2-on-1.
Yeah. I don't recall. Doesn't mean that it didn't happen on a WWF pay-per-view before. So
yeah,
you can correct me.
But again, if Smoky Mountain doesn't exist, neither did WrestleMania or SummerSlam 91. I mean, we know Vince in his, if I don't remember it, fans don't remember it, attitude. So, why let the truth get in in the way of a good story?
Exactly. All right. I think we've talked about the finish of the match. Razor goes for a Razor's Edge, but he gets clipped by Jarrett. When he goes for the figure four, Razor kicks Jarrett into Rhodey, and then he hits the Razor's Edge on Jarrett. He ultimately hits the Razor's Edge on Jarrett for the win. Again, not a lot. I mean, there was frequent tags in the match by Rhodey and Jarrett, so that was a good thing. And I thought Rhodey's work was fine. Anything that you think we should note before we move forward?
No, just glimpses of what we would see later and what would become a shockingly important act in the company's history.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. It's funny about this time period because over the next year we see a lot of acts that become significant parts of the WWF later on, and we just didn't know it at the time.
Yeah.
We get another segment with Jerry Lawler arguing with Jack Tunney to have the match right now with Brett, thinking that Brett's hurt, and then they run a video on Psycho Sid, I don't think they were calling him Psycho Sid yet, but it had been revealed that Ted DiBiase was working with Sid all along, that he talked him into becoming a bodyguard for Shawn. Ultimately, the plan to kind of get Shawn out of the way and have Sid be the challenger to Diesel. Kind of a plot hole, like, well, what if Shawn won the match at WrestleMania, So don't be smart, wrestling fans. Don't be smart. All right. John, I promise we will not go very long on this next match, although I have a surprising take on it. So heel Mabel with Sir Mo taking on Adam Bomb in a King of the Ring qualifier. This match goes not even 2 minutes. Mabel wins it with a power slam. Wade's rating 1 3/4, quote, good for what it was, all action with some impressive big man flying moves. Too short for anything major to go wrong also. And I'm actually in that camp. You know what? For what it was, I enjoyed it. It went quick. It didn't need to go any longer. If it went longer, it probably would not have worked. So I again, for what they were working with, it's unfortunate, and it's in my notes here, it's unfortunate that this is at the expense of Adam Bomb, because he's clearly, his initial heel run was a nothing. They turn him face. They do nothing with him. Not that he knocks it out of the park anywhere else. I know he's, what is he, Mortis when he goes to WCW, and then eventually one half of Chronic, right? Him and Brian Adams. It's not like he killed it somewhere else, but,
Yeah, it's fine. We know they're gonna, again, in hindsight, we know who's winning the King of the Ring tournament. So do a squash, more or less a squash, and call it a day, move on. Yeah.
That's what they did. And it's not like they were pushing Adam Bomb. It's not like he was at the top of the card. So unfortunately, this is what causes him to leave the company, because he supposedly was promised an Intercontinental title run. But I don't know if I buy that, because you're going to get an Intercontinental title run with Shawn Michaels and Jarrett and Razor there. I don't know about that.
Yeah, but Vince could have told that to everybody.
I got you, pal.
Yeah, who knows? But to your point, Chronic was a solid team in WCW eventually, but he's not like some great talent that you're, it's not like what we said with Hakushi, it's just, it was what it was, move on.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. After the match, Todd Pettengill talks to Razor Ramon, who introduces Savio Vega, says he's got a different look. And I'm saying to myself, he doesn't look like Quang anymore. Says he's one of the biggest stars of the Caribbean. He fought against him several times, but it's nice to have him on his side. I guess, I don't know. My idea about having him as a surprise partner, if Razor turns around and says, "Hey, I got a surprise. It's not quite the Macho Man. It's Survivor Series '93. It's Savio Vega." And everybody's like, "Who?"
Yeah. I mean, they could have done Aldo Montoya as a replacement since he had been there and then have the Savio run in. But
Yeah,
yeah, you got to establish these guys. So it
yeah,
worked okay for that.
yeah. All right. WWF Tag Team Championship is next. Owen Hart and Yokozuna defending against the team from whom they won the Tag Team Championship at WrestleMania. That would be Billy and Bart, the Smoking Guns. Um, Billy Gunn being a one of those pieces that we talked about.
Yeah.
Little did we know at the time. Let's see. So I mentioned a rematch, and Bart had defeated Owen. So they were starting to do not they were starting to, because they would beat champions in the past. But Bart had beaten Owen on an episode of Raw leading into the show. So they were trying to create the idea that the Guns could get the title back. We get another spot with Jerry pleading with Jack Tunney to let him fight Brett right away due to his knee injury, and they show Brett icing his knee. I think that was before the introductions. I don't remember exactly. I just my notes are a little unusually out of order on this podcast, so I apologize to our listeners. Anyway, a little under 6 minutes on this, John. Owen and Yoko win it. So your finish is Bart attempts a crossbody on Owen, but Owen ducks and Bart flies through the ropes. Yokozuna, who's on the outside, drops the leg on Bart, throws him back in the ring, and Owen just pins him. So it's kind of quick. Wade has this at 2 1/4. A good match. The Guns are able to carry their half of the tag team well. They've improved lately. I don't know if I saw much of that in this match, but it was fine. The Owen and Yoko team has clicked. The finish came suddenly, but that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, and if you think about it, if somebody Yoko's size leg drops you on the outside, it should be over. It was a sudden ending, but it was a believable one because that could be a knockout, should be a knockout blow. It was a solid match, not too dissimilar from WrestleMania, just kind of trying to take advantage of having Owen in the ring, and obviously, as we talked about with Yoko's size and everything, this was a good use of Yoko at this point to come in, hit a couple moves, tag back out, let Owen do the bulk of the work. The Guns, are a solid tag team, so they can, have some good tag team, double team moves. We're always good at that, and create some movement, and then take the fall, and like you said, move on to whatever's next for the tag titles. Not a lot to it, but perfectly fine.
Yeah, and I thought about this. This is a good then and now discussion. In today's world, I think people want longer matches and more work. Yeah, but I don't think you want that in this match. What do you want this to go? Another 5 or 10 minutes just to see Yoko huffing and puffing? I mean, that's what he's going to do.
Yeah.
And to your point, that hitting the leg drop on the outside, I mean, we had a champion for, 7 years that would drop the leg and finish matches.
Sure.
So if a 302-pounder could drop a leg and finish a match, certainly a 650-pounder should destroy you.
That's right. Yeah, and I think again they were doing this short pay-per-view, so they're gonna, cut a little bit out of each match that they would have if they were trying to, stretch it out to a full 3 hours.
Yeah.
And I think we're back into this similar kind of cycle with these 5-match in between, pay-per-views that WWE's been doing, where you're getting, unfortunately, longer shows, but with the same amount of wrestling as a In Your House show with all these commercials and everything. And we don't have to go too much into it, but it did really remind me of kind of that where you're like fewer matches, we're gonna have maybe some shorter matches. And I said this off air to you that it's the one extreme with WWE and the other extreme with AEW, and I'm longing for something in the middle on
Yeah.
so many things. And this is one of them where I didn't, so many people were just like, did they need two 35-minute plus matches on Double or Nothing? Did they need certain matches would go like 18 minutes or whatever? And a lot of the people I saw online commenting on, that was a good match, but it would have been better at, 12 minutes instead of 18. So
Mhm.
sometimes less is more,
Yeah.
and some balance is good. This was certainly a case where less was more, and nobody
Yeah.
would have been, oh man, I really wish Yoko and Owen versus the Smoking Guns would have gone, 15 minutes. It's like,
No,
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 that would have
no.
just dragged, and we would have been, oh my God, when is this thing going to end?
No, it went the length it needed to go. And you mentioned the 5 match setup. You know, one of the things when I became a flight instructor, they teach us is the law of primacy. Like the first thing that you learn is what sticks with you the most, something like
Mm,
that. And this is about the time that Triple H comes into the promotion,
mm,
right? So, we know that he always had an eye on like the business side of wrestling. And I wonder if, he looked at this setup and said, um, not to be sarcastic, but one day if I'm in charge of things, this is the way I would want it, you
right.
know,
Yeah.
especially if he's thinking it in real time, if that's his ambition, is to not just wrestle, but to be behind the scenes,
Right.
you're always going to kind of default to what you first, learned. I mean, how many repeat angles have we seen in NXT with Shawn Michaels? The whole thing with Roxanne with getting knocked out
Mm,
and her getting stripped of the title. That was a Shawn Michaels story in '95.
right. Right. Yeah,
So
that's an interesting point. Even if it's subconscious.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Now I'm sure Triple H didn't think, all right, one day I want to run a pay-per-view with an hour and a half for wrestling and 4 hours of airtime. I mean,
Right.
but hey, that's another conversation. All right. Okay. Oh, and the one thing, this is where I noted Doc's commentary. He actually brings up good points. He talks about Fuji, Mr. Fuji being a multi-time tag team champion. So,
Right.
the influence of that on Owen Hart and Yoko's, I mean, it's a good
Yeah.
point.
Sure.
And he talks about keeping Owen in the ring as much as possible so you don't get Yoko in there. Now I say the opposite because you want Yoko huffing and puffing, but but I get
That
where
that
Doc's
wasn't the
coming
story
from.
they were telling, Frank.
Yes, yes, yes. Stick to the script, Frank. Stick to the script. Okay. All right. We move on. Todd
Well, the other
Pettengill.
thing, actually,
Oh
real
yeah, go
quick, I
ahead.
just thought of and there was a consistency that he brought up a few times throughout the show, and we'll definitely get to it in the main event, was the heels taking too much time celebrating and not going for pins. And I know he had brought it up a few times throughout the show, so I won't bring up the specific times, but I thought that was an interesting. It reminded me of Jim Ross and his AEW, especially. Um, you know, you got to hook a leg. You got to. Why
Yeah.
are you gloating? You're taking too much time. There was some good analysis, and a lot of it was levied against the heel. So even though I was annoyed by his overly, pro heel kind of, overall presentation, it wasn't 100% where he would get upset at, you know, ultimately Sid. Why are you gloating? Pin him and win the championship.
Right.
So I thought there to your point, there were definitely as I'm remembering, there was definitely some good in there too, for sure.
Right. All right. So Todd Pettengill does an interview with Diesel, an interview that I actually really enjoy because he actually talks more like himself. He's not talking in his tough guy Diesel, fake tough guy accent. He talks about losing his mother around Christmas time. I didn't know that actually.
Yeah.
wishes everyone a happy Mother's Day. And then he kind of is a little more, he talks about the match with Sid, and you see a little more of Diesel come out, but he's kind of retaining the Kevin Nash, side of him. So I thought that was really, good. And then we go from the good to the sublime, where Jerry Lawler brings a smoking hot brunette into the ring and introduces him as his mother. And I'm just like, I'm watching this, and I'm like, this is just not funny. Sorry.
Well, and it's just it's the king being the king.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all. I mean, it wasn't like
in real
there
time,
was no point to it.
In real time, it doesn't bother me because, like, I how Jerry Lawler is, but I mean, just knowing all the history that we know about him, it kind of, makes it a little icky. And
and real quick, I want to just go back to the Diesel interview.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And I think we've talked about in the past some of the issues with Diesel as a babyface and why it didn't work. And if you go back and watch like the last 15 seconds of the interview, that's a great example of why the Diesel doesn't work. He goes very corny. He makes some goofy kind of faces. And I can't remember what he said or anything, but it was definitely, going from that more sincere, talking about his mother and some of that stuff, talking about trying to figure out where he stands with Shawn. There was some storyline stuff in there because he had been against Shawn, but now Shawn's a baby. I thought that part was fine, but then he just said some goofy stuff at the very end while kind of getting all excited and making this cartoonish face. And I said, and that's the type of stuff I think that held him back from really being the babyface star he could have been during that year-long, run.
He was, fans were starting to cheer him at the end of 94, and then they infused too much of the corporate good guy, the smiling, corny phrase, person like you're saying. I don't know how to describe it otherwise.
Sure.
And it just takes away. It's more like he's playing something than actually being himself. And for a brief moment, to your point, you're sitting there and you're enjoying Kevin Nash talk about his mom,
right?
And you're like, this is how he should sound, not like a tough guy like this. Like that's just stupid. That's not how he talks,
right?
So,
because Kevin Nash is cool.
Yes.
But babyface Diesel was not cool. Yeah.
And one of the things is calling someone Big Daddy cool. No one's going to want to walk around and say, yeah, man, I'm Big Daddy cool. Like, no, you're not. You're a nerd.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Would you have worn as a, 18 years old? I forget.
I was 15 at that time.
15, okay. At 15 years old, would you walk around with a Big Daddy cool shirt?
No. And
you walk around with a Stone Cold shirt in a couple of years, though.
Oh, for sure. And I want to say, I might have brought this up the last time or one of the previous ones, that I had a friend in high school who just was so happy when he turned back heel at Survivor Series, because he was a big Diesel fan. And then he was just kind of like, and then it was like, yes, back to the Diesel that I, had really become a fan with, the previous year or whatever, year and a half earlier. So, yeah.
Sure. All right. Back to the Jerry Lawler interview. He says, after Jerry beats Brett, the woman's going to challenge Helen Hart, and Jerry Lawler calls Helen Hart a sack of wrinkled skin. So, just Jerry Lawler stuff. Brett is interviewed by Todd Pettengill, who was shown icing his knee earlier, as I mentioned. But then he says his injury is 100%. He knows it's not April Fool's, but it'll have to do. And he says that the injury was a ruse. But then it's weird because, he comes out and he's still limping. But then he's not limping anymore. So it's like,
it was like he had to reveal it to the fans at home and then a second time to Lawler in the ring. It's all I couldn't think, because I thought it was I was like, wait, was Lawler not watching? Because once he starts walking normal, Lawler does the cartoonish Lawler scared face.
Right.
But I'm like, were you not watching did they not show it in the arena? I mean, I don't know. I mean,
I don't think
it
they would
was
do it. I
weird.
don't think they were. I don't know if these interviews were being shown on the Tron.
And maybe that's what it is that he had to do it for the television audience, and he had to do it separate for the in the arena and Lawler himself, because yeah, it was odd. I mean, it was
Yeah,
fine, but it was a little odd.
strange for sure.
And I will say also, this is just a little kind of, I thought, of interesting aside. When Vince threw to the interview, he said, Todd Pettingill's got Bret Hart at the gorilla position. And I was like, he referred to it as the gorilla position
Oh, I
on
missed
air.
that.
Yeah, I kind of did a double take and I wrote it down in my notes and I said, I wonder, that must have been a slip.
Yeah. I didn't realize they were calling it gorilla already at this point. Like
That was kind of surprising to me too.
Yeah, I thought they called the gorilla after he passed, but
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
What do you think of Bret revealing it to the TV audience? Well, I guess the TV audience, and then revealing it before the match, like because Bruce Mitchell, obviously former columnist here at the Torch, comments about it in his write-up. Says that why would he reveal it before the match? Why wouldn't he walk into the match, give Jerry that edge, think he has the edge, and then fool him? And the only thing I thought about is, well, Bret's booked to lose this, so it kind of makes him look stupid. But then really not, because we got Hakushi interference. So anyway, I'm throwing that all at you here. What do you think about the reveal before the match starts? Is it 6 or 1 half dozen or another?
Yeah, I mean, I think because of Lawler's scared expression and as Bret's getting into the ring, he starts to run. I think it had that effect.
Yeah.
Without it having to be like in the match. So I think it worked fine. I mean, I get what Bruce was saying at the time.
Yeah.
Like you can get maybe a little bit more of the surprise, but it would have been delayed by 30 seconds. I mean, I don't think it's that big a deal to harp on.
Yeah, I'm with you. I watching it and I didn't think much of it myself. So this goes around 5 minutes. Your winner is Jerry Lawler via interference from Shinja and Hakushi. So the ref gets his foot caught in the ropes. Shinja and Hakushi had already come out. He performs a splash and 2 headbutts from the top rope, who's holding Bret Hart down. Wade seems to think that the referee got back to the ring too soon because he kind of like avoids seeing the second splash. It's kind of bad.
I didn't notice.
It's
but yeah.
Like if you watch it again, like he's coming and he's like, he's got his head and he's kind of like not looking. Okay, I can't see the second headbutt.
Well, we know WWF referees have no peripheral vision.
Yes.
And AEW referees have no vision at all.
WWF refs have no peripheral vision. AEW refs have no common sense.
Well, that's true too.
It's
like they've got, what are those things? The blinders, the things that you put on the side of the horses.
Yes.
It's like they've got the tunnel vision. I will say though, I wrote in my notes, that is one of the all-time great ref bumps.
Yeah.
I mean, he took that bump and then goes out of the ring and gets caught in the ropes upside.
Usually it's just an elbow to the head or knocked in the turnbuckle or something.
Because so many times it's like a bump and then they fall down and they're knocked out for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, this was a great ref bump. Put that in. They should give that the WrestleMania moment 1 year for the Hall of Fame. This ref bump belongs.
Yeah,
this is a Hall
That's
going
to be the next category in 20 years when they got nobody to induct. Ref bumps.
That's right. This has got to be the first one to go in.
Legendary referee bumps. Wade has this at 1.5 stars, an okay match. Lawler is really good at what he does, but as Bret said earlier in the show, it's certainly not wrestling anymore. I don't remember him saying that, but that doesn't mean he didn't say it. This is also the Peacock edit, so who knows?
Yeah.
The angle kept the Bret Hakushi storyline alive. Now, I want to bring that up because Wade talks about this in Below the Bottom Line, and it's an interesting point. if Brett's not going to go after Hakushi for costing him the match, then why is Brett losing this match? Because ultimately, Brett and Lawler have the Kiss My Foot match, which we have the joy of covering next month. What do you think of that? Because it's not a bad point. And what ends up happening is Brett, and this is where it's in my notes, Brett and Hakushi, they work the houses. I mean, they do a match in July.
Yeah,
He's not getting his revenge on Hakushi, and that's what cost him the match.
Right. There's a few possibilities. One is Vince changes his mind and goes in another direction, which is bad because you're setting things up that you're not paying off. Two is that they wanted to get the heat. They wanted Brett to lose because they wanted to set up the Kiss My Foot match and to keep that feud going. Mm-hmm. And you can't have Brett lose clean. So who else are you going to use other than the guy he wrestled earlier? And
that's fair.
I'm going to go, more 90% leaning towards the latter, that's probably the thinking.
Right.
And you can always, because Jerry's not a full-time wrestler, he's not going to be going out and wrestling Brett on the house shows, 5 nights a week or whatever it was. So you can keep Hakushi in that spot, even if you're not going to pay it off in a big way on a Raw or a pay-per-view. Mm-hmm. So from that standpoint, of course, not remembering what had necessarily happened and looking back on it, as I'm watching this, I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense because they're keeping both feuds alive, and he's probably going to face Hakushi in a rematch on Raw next week. And, it didn't happen. Yeah. But, in hindsight, but at the time, that's probably makes a lot of sense, but they just didn't.
Oh, and in today's world, that match would have taken, that would have been booked. Like you would have seen on social media, we'd have Twitter or X, excuse me. X or whatever, Blue Sky, you would have seen as a result of what happened at King of the Ring, Bret Hart faces Hakushi. So it would have been paid off.
Yeah.
So, we talk a lot about, the modern wrestling and how there's so much product and whatnot, but at least you do get those payoffs.
Yeah.
Not necessarily good payoffs, but you do get the continue. And this is what Wade talks about with connecting, the pay-per-views, connecting the shows. There was no evidence yet. Because they're still doing Raw and syndicated TV and pay-per-views months apart. So the setup is really not in place yet. So it's fair for him to ask those questions.
Sure. For sure. Yeah.
Because we don't know the pattern yet. So
right.
I get his concern with that. Yeah, I mean, it's not much of a match. I mean, the only thing I noticed was Jerry hits a pile driver on Brett, and like a minute later, Brett's up.
Oh, yeah, that was a big no-sell.
Yeah.
That was a big no-sell.
Yeah. So we agree there. All right, we get a very dark promo from Sid, and this is a good time to ask you this with Sid. I feel like, as they did with a lot of people around this time period, I feel like they were cartooning Sid a little bit, playing too much into the psycho part, having him blink his eyes, and then they were like the way the camera angles were shot with Sid, like you would see it like facing up a lot, but I feel like they were really hammering it, and I'm like, this is kind of like a tongue-in-cheek version. Like the Sid that I liked on the WWF side anyway was the Sid that we got when he turned heel, and he's just talking like a crazy man, but he's talking like a normal crazy man, if that's an oxymoron. But you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
I feel like this is more of a cartoonized version of Sid. I don't know if you felt the same way. Am I looking too much into it?
I don't know. I guess I always kind of, I'd have to maybe see some of the other ones that you're talking about to kind of juxtapose. Because he always seemed a little cartoonish, but I always liked the Psycho Sid character.
Yeah,
and I liked his his little rap, and his promos from the time. But I guess I think a little bit more fondly of it in that, what is it, maybe 96 into 97, when he's a good guy, but feuding with Shawn Michaels, kind of babyface.
Yeah,
Some of that era was, I think, a little better than this at this point. But
much better.
yeah. But I'd have, like I said, go back and watch some of those maybe, and I can see them side by side, because nothing really stood out too much about this one. But you know, with Vince, it's always the Viper Randy Orton.
Somebody's got to be a character.
It's it's Psycho Sid, it's Big Daddy Cool, it's et cetera, et cetera. It's Double J, it's the bad guy,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Hitman, the King of Hearts.
Everybody's got to have some kind of a gimmick.
And it's okay if that's a nickname, but when that's all it is in terms of character, it gets to that one note, one dimension over, and then it becomes cartoonish, because if all I have to play is Psycho and that's it, it's gonna go cartoon because there's
Yeah.
no depth to it to go anywhere else with it.
Yeah, yeah.
And maybe once he's kind of back and as a baby face, because he's trying to be that Psycho character, but as a baby face, it's almost like creates layers to it that wasn't there
Yeah.
initially. So maybe that's part of it too.
I just thought of this now. I feel like the Sid from late 96 into 97 was what Diesel should have been the whole time.
Yeah, interesting.
I mean, the New York, we might have to put an asterisk, but I mean, the New York crowd is clearly behind Sid at Survivor Series 96.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like crowds were always behind Sid.
Yeah.
Rumble 92.
Mm.
So it's like, yeah, I just feel like, again, it's when Vince gets focused on something or he gets an idea, he knocks you over the head with it. He's crazy, he's psycho, so he's got to blink his eyes, and we got to focus the camera and look up on him, and he's got to sweat a lot, and it's like,
was there something with the lighting too? Was there something in this one? There was something funny about the lighting, maybe, or am I thinking of the video? I might be thinking about the video.
Yeah, I think so. They were trying to create this very dark, very maniacal, type of presentation. And, what about the decision to put him with DiBiase? Did he need DiBiase?
DiBiase needed him.
Yeah, I guess so.
That's where I'm coming from, because we've talked about it, how ineffective his corporation, whatever it was called, $1 million team, whatever it was,
$1 million corporation.
$1 million. It was
basically the Misfits in Action before the Misfits in Action were a thing.
Right, and it was just, okay, we don't have anything to do with this lower mid-card wrestler heel. Let's put him with DiBiase, and at least he has numbers. And that was, at least he had, and at most he had. But Sid gave him some credibility because he was Sid. Yeah. And so, no, I don't think he needed DiBiase, but I think DiBiase needed him.
Yeah. Because that's the only credible guy in that, Tatanka, forget it. Nikolai Volkov was dead in the water. Nikolai Volkov was dead in the water in 1990 when he turned babyface. So it could be better in 94, 95.
And they could have done something with Kama, but they just didn't. He steals the chain, or he steals the urn and turns it into a chain. But he was the next one up for Undertaker.
Yeah.
They were just
lining up. I call it the parade of goofballs in 95.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah.
All right. I didn't take many notes on this part of it. They do the house giveaway where they call the winner. They actually get through, and
the second try.
Yeah. Oh, was it this? Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, the first number didn't work, and they had to call again. So
So I have a couple things. One,
Okay.
I putting Stephanie in the bin was the most athletic thing Todd Pettengill ever did. He like picks her
Oh,
up
that's
and puts her
right.
in.
Yes, yes.
So that, and then I was having bad flashbacks to Mr. McMahon's $1 Million
Oh
Mania.
no.
And I've maybe brought this up in the past. I think I've at least talked to you about it, whether I did on a show or not. I was at the first one, which
Oh
was in
wow.
Oakland, when he had Charlie Haas out there with him for one of them, and he got rickrolled. He kept getting wrong numbers and busy signals, and we're sitting there in the audience. Now, I've gone to a lot of shows, Frank. This is definitely by far the worst show I've ever been to
Oh
for a
wow.
number of reasons. But I mean, you're just sitting there going, and in the arena, you couldn't really hear what was going on the phone, and you didn't care. You're just like, get me to Jeff Hardy's match, get me Shawn Michaels, get me to Jericho, because it's not like they didn't have talent, but it was just like, oh my God. So I'm watching this. As soon as Todd misdials or whatever happens with the first one, I'm just having horrible flashbacks to Vince McMahon standing up on the screen. He literally had not dialed the phone probably in 10 years. And then when like you're bringing out Charlie Haas to try to increase the, entertainment value of the segment, it's just like,
If I'm not
oh my God.
if I'm not mistaken, didn't that whole thing end with like the set falling down on Vince? And
Yep.
that was like a year after the whole limo angle, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
It was like I remember at the time I'm thinking like, what is this? Do we have like the annual "Let's try to kill Vince" segment? Is that what this is? Like,
I guess so. And if you remember, it actually started, and not that I want to bring it up, but it started with Trump.
mm,
Trump bought Raw,
I
and
remember
they
that.
clear they clearly changed their mind because Vince bought it back 1 week later. But one of the things that Trump had said was this was his idea. He was going to start giving away money. So they had already set it in motion. Then Vince came back in and was just like, this is a terrible idea, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah, it's like okay.
Because they already had it in motion when it was
Yeah,
supposed to be Trump. So whatever happened with that made them change their mind, but they kept this gimmick, and good for the people who won 50,000, 100,000, 200. I mean, think it was all legit. So hey, good for those fans for
yeah.
winning their money, but it made for some really, really bad TV and really, really bad in-person.
I can
Uh,
imagine that being really bad in the arena.
I will say this though, that was the night that Jericho put Shawn Michaels head first through the obscenely expensive Jeritron.
Oh, that was that show, huh?
That was that show. The only good thing that happened, and the
Okay.
only other noteworthy thing that happened on that show was the dark match before Raw was Bryan Danielson against Lance Cade. I should say Oakland's own Bryan Danielson
Yeah, you've
against.
talked about that.
Yeah, I've mentioned that before, I think, and how I'm sitting there, you're not paying attention. They're like, hailing from right here in Oakland, California, Bryan Danielson. What?
Yeah.
And it was still a ways before he actually signed, but he got that little bit of a try, and he won the dark match, which I thought was
Mhm.
really interesting with cattle mutilation. So it was a really interesting thing, but then the show was horrible.
Yeah. It's so
So
funny. You never know. You never know who you're watching. You never know what's coming, and then like you look back and you're like, oh my God, I was in the arena when Brian
yep.
did it, like
I was in the arena for Shawn Michaels' last match ever on Monday Night Raw.
oh, look at that.
It was the last Raw before the
For
WrestleMania when he
WrestleMania.
lost to Undertaker, and didn't
Yeah.
know it at the time because I was not expecting him to lose that match.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that, and then in hindsight, I'm like, oh crap, I got to see Shawn's last, Raw match.
Not to get too far away from the topic at hand, but I was at the Monday Night Raw where all of the people from Raw were stuck in Europe because of the
Oh,
volcanoes.
yeah.
So I think it was Monday Night SmackDown or something. It was in the Izod Center, and it
Mhm.
was my wife's first in-person show.
So it was her fault.
Yeah, it's right. So the dark match was Undertaker against Triple H.
Oh,
So this is 2010. I looked at everybody. I go, There's your WrestleMania match next year. There's Triple H. There's Undertaker's next opponent.
Mm-hmm.
And sure as shit.
Yeah.
WrestleMania 27 was Undertaker and H. So
the first show I went to, we'll go way back, 98,
yeah.
was at UC Davis. It was 2 nights after Royal Rumble. So you had Royal Rumble, Shawn breaks his back, Austin wins. Monday Night Live, Raw, Austin, Tyson.
Yeah. Oh.
This was the next night, and it was a taping for the following week's Raw and
Okay.
a Shotgun Saturday Night taping. But they got the local, Bay Area promotion was APW, and they had APW matches as the warm-up matches as people are filing in. And I mean, it was Crash Holly before he was Crash Holly.
Wow.
I think I saw Christopher Daniels. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure he might have been there. And again, I'm really curious to see the list of other people, because at the time I didn't know who any of them were. But when Crash Holly debuted, I was like, that was that Lucky Leprechaun guy we saw from APW. So you never know. And I'm curious kind of if any of these other guys, ever made it, because I don't remember, back then I wasn't familiar with them. But who knows? You never know what you're going to see.
You never know. You never know. Just non-wrestling, and we'll move on. I went to a comedy show in 96, and it was like an ensemble bit. It wasn't like, there was a featured star. And this opening act was this guy named Kevin James.
Yeah.
I'm like, and like a couple of years later, the King of Queens starts. I'm like, wait a minute. I went to Governor's, and I had this local comedy show here in Long Island. I'm like, I went to Governor's and I saw this guy. You're like, whoa, what was that all about?
Well, we'll bring it a little full circle real quick. You mentioned this arena and some of the concerts that it had at the beginning, and I think you said Kiss was in there, right?
Yeah.
My uncle, when he was in college on campus, saw a concert with Kiss before they were Kiss.
Oh, wow.
I forget what their name was.
Wicked Lester.
What was that?
Wicked Lester.
There you go. So he saw them and he didn't know who they were. And then like a year or two later, when they suddenly hit it big as Kiss, he was like, wait a minute.
Saw those guys, yeah.
And you can't miss them. You can't forget them, right? Because they were doing the full gimmick, if I understand correctly and remember the story correctly. So, yeah.
All right, let's get to our main event. So we've talked about Diesel defending the WWF Championship against Sid with Ted DiBiase. So this follows the whole bit where Shawn Michaels was actually supposed to get this rematch, but he told Sid that he would give him the night off. He says, "You don't give me the night off." Called him a little puke or something like that.
Hits him with a bunch of power bombs, if I remember correctly.
Attacks him from behind and hits 3 power bombs. We didn't see it in real time. We had to see it a week later. Turns out Shawn was actually nursing injuries, so it was a way to write him off for a little bit. And Sid ends up getting the rematch. Now, in between all of this, he had joined the $1 Million Corporation after Bam Bam Bigelow failed to defeat Diesel for the title. Sid attacked Bam Bam, that turned him face, and Diesel made the save. So, and then we talked about Sid and Ted working all along together. Another wrinkle in this was Henry Godwinn had been introduced, and he had got hired by DiBiase to attack Diesel on Superstars. So bringing new people in.
Yeah.
This goes about 11 and a half minutes. Diesel wins it via DQ to retain the championship. So you mentioned what Doc Hendricks was talking about with Sid celebrating for too long. He had hit the power bomb, but he was celebrating, and Diesel ends up kicking out. He mounts a comeback, hits the jackknife, and then Tatanka comes in for the interference, and that's what calls for the belt. It's not really a good camera angle with Tatanka, by the way. You don't see him. So, again, production in 95, not the vaunted production that we get in the 2025 TKO version of WWE. But anyway, Wade has this at a 2. Not a bad match. It told the story and both men played their parts well. I still say if every match ends clean, no one would lose credibility in the process, but this finish was another statement by McMahon against that belief.
30 years later, he said the same thing on a podcast
It
last
is
week.
so
Frank.
crazy going back and doing these shows and seeing Wade say the same things that he's saying today. And we're saying it a lot recently with WWE.
Yeah.
We're saying it a lot. Jay and Seth. You had the tag match on SmackDown a few weeks ago, that last week with the Wyatt 6 coming out. And
that angered me to no end.
I missed that because I was watching the Knicks that night. Sean Radican was texting me and he's like, "Oh, I don't want to spoil it for you." I'm like, "Spoil it for me. I don't
go ahead.
Who cares?"
I posted. I don't post much live, especially for the pay-per-views a little bit more, but not Raw, not SmackDown.
Yeah.
And I posted what a crappy or shitty whatever I said. That
waste of time, and and this is the thing, and I hope I'm not repeating like things that Todd Martin talks about a lot, but I'm with Todd. When you advertise a match, and especially here, this is your launch In Your House pay-per-view. This is a new series, okay? This to me is the last place where you want to give people a middle finger and say, well, you know what? We're going to give you a match, which, by the way, I thought it was a very good match. I mean, I thought for what these two guys were and for the styles that they had, I thought they made it work. I mean, we're not going to get a 5-star darling out of Diesel, out of Kevin Nash and Sid Udy. It's not going to happen.
No, Sid needs a Shawn Michaels to elevate him to higher quality, and Diesel wasn't going to be that guy. But I did write, my only note was Sid gave Kevin Nash John Cena's version of a camel clutch. I mean, it was a very, very, he's not wrenching back on that camel clutch. Yeah. It was a very attitude adjust, not whatever, STFU. It was Allison's least favorite move in the history of the universe. She always talks about, oh no, John Cena's touching the guy's ears. But that I think was the worst part of the match. It was a very poor execution, but otherwise, I mean, Sid's very stiff and he's not great at selling, but they made it work. They sold the back injury, which went to the Henry Godwin attack. They had the focus on the back. Another nice thing, Doc Hendricks. Well, can you're softening up his back for the power bomb.
Yeah.
Can Diesel do the power bomb if he's got a bad back? So there was definitely a good story up until the end. The execution, other than that weak camel clutch, was good. It was all fine. And I always find it amusing when clearly he's going to pin him for a 3 count when Tatanka comes in and attacks him at 2.5.
Yeah.
So are you even protecting him at that point?
No.
It's like either protect him or do the 3 count. Don't do this BS in between thing where, well, we're protecting him by not having him get the pin, but he's clearly getting pinned. It's weak sauce all around.
It's weak. And as it turns out, again, benefit of hindsight, knowing what's to take place, show me the signature win that Diesel gets as a champion. It's not there. I mean, Shawn is not established yet. Okay. And that's probably his biggest victory, but he's not established at WrestleMania 11. You go back to the Rumble, the match with Brett ends in shenanigans. Here, it's it's a DQ. All right. And then, you're throwing Mabel at him. You're throwing the British Bulldog. His best match is a match that he loses to Brett. It's Survivor Series.
Yeah.
So, what is the problem with pinning Sid? What is the problem with pinning Sid in this? Again, first In Your House pay-per-view, people paying money to watch this, and you're giving him a middle finger. And I know the idea is, well, they're setting up the tag match at King of the Ring. Well, I don't know that. I don't know that yet. And number one. Number two, Diesel and Bam Bam Bigelow against Sid and Tatanka. Whoop-de-doo.
Right. I mean, you can set it up a number of ways on Raw. And
you
yeah,
could set it up with Diesel beating Sid, Tatanka coming out and attacking him, and Bam Bam making the save, and it's the same effect.
you know how many times I've written in hits and misses, this could have happened after the match and gotten to the same point. I
Exactly.
can't tell you how many times.
Yeah.
Do the run in, you want the heat, give the finish, and then do the thing with the beat down because you're still getting to that same point.
Yeah.
It's 30, however many years we're
It's the same thing. And again, I bring up Wade's article below the bottom line. When if you have Sid lose clean, Sid could talk about how, Diesel got the better of him and, what he has to do next time in order to beat him. Okay. You can tell that story.
You could tie the gloating into it, Frank. You had that story that Doc Hendricks is telling. And you could even have a little bit of DiBiase in his ear. Next time, you're not going to gloat. You're going to because you had him beat.
Right. That's a good point. Because what's the point of DiBiase being there if he's not going to advise him?
Right.
Even on television, what's the point of DiBiase being in his corner?
Exactly.
So, and what he says, it creates see, this is the problem with Vince, because again, Vince doesn't see wrestling as simulated athletic competition. He sees it as entertainment. He sees it as a story, like a movie.
The soap opera, the male soap opera.
He sees more this exactly. That's what I was looking for. He sees more the soap opera side of it than he does the athletic competition part of it.
Right.
And that's why when guys come in that are, good workers and stuff like that, they don't get the push because they can't really tell a story. It wasn't even until Brett. I would argue it wasn't even until Brett had the feud with Jerry where Vince finally realized, okay, he does have a personality. Okay. He's the, again, it creates the idea, and you teach fans. If you have Diesel beat Sid clean here, you teach fans that, okay, Sid got the better of him. Sid's now talking about what he has to do next time. Okay, so what I'm watching is athletic competition.
Yeah.
And so what that does is it teaches me to invest in the match.
Right.
Because now what happened to your point, Sid gloating is what cost him the match.
Which has the soap opera elements too. You can do them both. That's the whole point, right?
Right.
And I've always said, to me, the best matches have to have the great in-ring, the great work in the context of a story that makes me care about the match, want to see it ahead of time, and care about the outcome. And that's where everything comes together. Like sometimes you'll get Sami Zayn versus Shinsuke Nakamura. Now, you watch that match in a vacuum at that NXT Dallas. Great match. But it was just kind of a showcase. It was a vacuum. It didn't have that. And then you can look at another match like Ospreay and Hangman, where it's the finals of a tournament. It has outcome that matters. It has two guys who have made their case why this match is important to them. It has the great in-ring on that's where everything is going to come together. Whereas a lot of AEW matches miss out on that first part. Not that one, but a lot of them for me do. And a lot of WWE matches historically have been too much with the storyline, not enough with the wrestling. But of course, in the last 10 years, we can't say that WWE doesn't have great workers, because they do. And they've had a lot of great matches too. And it's where you get somebody like Kevin Owens, who has been, one of my favorites for the last however many years, because he's a master of it all. He can do babyface, he can do heel, he can tell the story, he can get you to invest in the match, whether he wants you to cheer him or boo him, and then when you get to the match, he's going to have a great match. those people are what you want. And back in 1995, Vince McMahon is going to push the big guy, either the Mabel big or the, bodybuilder big, Luger types, or the personality goofy Doink the Clown kind of acts.
Yeah.
That's who he's going to push. And as we talked about, you get a good worker like Hakushi coming in, and he's not going to take advantage of his in-ring, and he's going to push the stereotype and all of that stuff. And then you start to get more and more of these cop-out finishes. And
because the idea is, well, whoever caused the interference or, whatever, there's heat on them. So we want to see that person get theirs.
right.
But the problem is when you do that, number one, when you do that all the time, it loses its value, but you also educate people that what happens in the match doesn't matter, because you're just waiting to see the interference. Like, I can't say, I'll be honest with you. I've actually skipped some television lately. Number one, because of time constraints, but I'm sitting there like, why am I watched Raw last week, and I'm like, why did I bother? Because there was just, you watch these matches and you're just waiting to see who's going to get distracted, who's going to run out. And then sometimes you get a match finish and you don't even get an announcement. Like, you don't even know, because they don't want to draw attention to it, which is a whole nother problem in and of itself. But
yeah, Triple H has a lot of good instincts, but
he's got a lot of the old man in him too, though, unfortunately.
he does. And I have always contended that time off doesn't work for wrestlers if you're not also giving time off to creative. And I know, like, Wade has often advocated for rotating time off for wrestlers throughout the year to give them vacation time, time with their family, and all of that's important. I have always contended you got to take 6 weeks after WrestleMania off. I know it'll never happen, but the creative gets burnt out just as much as the wrestlers do.
Yeah. Oh, it's
You're
hard.
talking about putting on a show 52 weeks a year, and then 4 days later, you got another show 52 days later or a year. It's an impossible task. And as much as I criticize, I can also see where you're like, we've got to do this again next week, and again the next week, and again the next week.
Yeah, it's not easy.
It's an impossible task. So I give them a little bit of leeway on that front, but at the same time, there's a lot better that they can do even with those constraints where, like you said, like I said, do the finish, then do the run in. Do the thing, then do the thing. Like, you can tell the story, and you're starting to see every week the ratings for Raw on Netflix go down about 100,000. It was like 3.2 million, 3.13, 2.9, 2.8. Last week was 2.7.
Yeah.
Now, the shows aren't terrible. They're not as good as they were at the beginning of the year. There's been a drop off in quality in general, but they're not like, I'm not sitting there hate watching.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm not getting excited about the main event
Right.
like I should be. Because
That's
you
the
tell
last,
me
that's the
you're going to
last thing
get
you get
like,
excited about.
right. And it's like, I'm like, okay, hey, that should be a really good match for 20 minutes, and then there's going to be a crap finish. And that's going to be a really good 15 minutes of wrestling and then a crap finish. And that's what they have trained the audience to do. And I just looked it up out of curiosity. The buy rate for this one was 332,000.
Mm-hmm.
Buy rate for In Your House 280,000. Now there's stuff in between. Buy rate for In Your House 3.
What was the buy rate for King of the Ring?
Well, I'll get back to that. Buy rate for
Okay.
the other one, 160,000 by September. Let me go back here. King of the Ring, SummerSlam was only 205,000.
Yeah.
Wow. Let's
Imagine
see
Diesel
here.
versus Sid. Diesel versus Mabel not doing better.
King of the Ring, 150,000.
So
So
there you
you
go.
had a lot more people. Part of it's the price point. A lot more people going for $15 because King of the Ring was in between, had 150,000 between 280 and 330.
Right.
So
But here's
part
the
of that's
thing.
the price point for sure.
I don't know that I buy that the price is the issue, because if you give people a show that they want to see, and if you give them, like, okay, let's make a couple of tweaks to this show. Let's say Diesel beats Sid clean. You could still do the nonsense after, right? And then let's say they do that ladder match with Razor or let's say Razor beats Jarrett for the IC title.
Just a little more newsworthy.
Yeah, I wonder exactly, because people left this show feeling like, what did I get? I didn't get anything.
It was a fun show. It was a perfectly good show, but it wasn't. Other than somebody winning a house, which I read they later sold it for $175,000 6 months later.
Yeah.
Good for them. But there wasn't a lot of newsworthiness coming out of this show.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that there was a lot of interest because that is a really good buy rate to begin with, but it doesn't
sustain. And if you give people a reason, if you give them a reason to spend, they'll spend it. People are not, I mean, yeah, you're going to have some people that, if it's more than a certain amount of money, I'm not going to pay for it. But, like anything else, and if there's something that you really want, you're going to figure out how to spend money. Sure. I guarantee you a lot of people watch this pay-per-view and we're like, come King of the Ring, I don't, I can just read about what happened. It's so, yeah. All right. Anything else that we have to talk about with I mean, I think match wise, we talked about the camel clutch. He puts it on twice, the camel clutch. We talked about Doc pointing it out. We talked about the celebrating too long after the power bomb. I mean, I think those are really the talking points. DiBiase, and by the way, I mean, DiBiase clearly, they're protecting him from taking bumps because of his back injury.
Sure.
It's like, and it's like, sometimes I wonder, like, why you let Bobby Heenan, well, Bobby Heenan couldn't take bumps either, so forget that. Like, what's he doing out there if he can't? Like, the whole idea of the heel manager, is to take bumps. I mean, how many did Bobby take over the years? How many did Jimmy Hart take over the years? Like,
sure.
To me, just DiBiase is just a waste of time out there,
Yeah, but he had more name recognition.
That's what it was, is the recognition.
He was a big deal.
Yeah. What it was on it to me, it was comfort for Vince. Because he's got this time period where he's got all these guys. I mean, these guys are really not unknowns, but they're not established. I mean, Diesel's not really established. Michaels, I mean, maybe Razor is. I mean, the only ones that are really established, I would say, are Brett and Undertaker. If you even consider Undertaker established at this point, he's not even on this card. So it's really kind of an unknown. So I think DiBiase was comfort for Vince. He's like, okay, he's a name. I could put him with the heels. I
made a lot of money with him.
Made a lot of money with him. Yeah. So by him being out there, he's giving some kind of credibility to these guys, even though it ultimately doesn't work. But in his mind, it works.
Sure. So, and I think that's it.
Yeah. So, all right. Before we wrap this up, me and my alternate universe questions. I think the answer is no. But is there an alternate timeline where Sid dethrones Diesel here?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. Because they still had a lot to do with him, with Shawn. That whole storyline hadn't totally finished. It had the unexpected turn after WrestleMania. And Sid was still fairly new. I mean, he had been around, then he disappeared, and then he's around again. I don't think they're going to put him on so soon.
That's the point right there.
Yeah.
His unreliable, like he's not really reliable.
Yeah.
Like, he's a great territory guy.
Well, and obviously he would give him the title eventually, but it would take a while. And so yeah, I mean, I think, but at this point, too new, too, or upon his return, too close to his return, and um,
Because
yeah,
this is the alternate scenario I heard. Sid beats Diesel. Shawn wins King of the Ring. Shawn dethrones Sid at SummerSlam. Shawn's your champ. Now Brett wins the Rumble, challenges Shawn because that creates more intrigue as to who wins the match. Because at WrestleMania 12, there is no doubt in anybody's mind that Shawn Michaels is winning that match. But by
right.
him going in as the champ with Brett as the challenger, and Shawn having been the champ for a while, there's actually intrigue to the ending of the match. But then
Yeah,
what are you doing with Diesel?
right.
It
And
throws everything off.
Sean's not necessarily the most reliable either. But
Oh,
obviously, again, he not like it would keep him from. Yeah, I mean, you could go that route. I think the
well, here's the thing. You don't get,
they like to do those big things at WrestleMania,
yeah, yeah,
and that's part of it. You want to. Vince probably wants to save Sean's ultimate crowning for
at WrestleMania.
WrestleMania, not SummerSlam.
Yeah,
I mean, but you know, a babyface Shawn versus a heel Sid with the backstory works for
yeah.
sure. I mean, if they wanted to do it, it would have worked.
Which is the match that was supposed to happen, by the way.
Hmm.
That was supposed to be SummerSlam. It was supposed to be Shawn and Sid, and they pivoted to Shawn and Razor.
Okay. Was that a second Intercontinental ladder match?
I think
Or
it
had
was
that happened?
that was that ended up being the ladder match. That was the
Yeah.
second ladder match between Shawn and
Yeah.
Razor. Um, but it
Well, we
was
won't complain about that.
correct. But it was supposed to be Shawn and Sid. I think Sid was supposed to challenge Shawn for the IC.
Hmm.
Um, which I don't know what I don't know where that would have left Razor, but I kind of agree with where they had things. You know,
Yeah. No, I mean, I think your scenario works perfectly fine, but that doesn't mean it works better or,
right?
whatever. Because yeah, there's a reason to do Sean and Sid, and there's a reason to make it for the world title, and eventually you're planning on putting the world title on Sean anyway. So there's a
Yeah,
lot of that lines up, but I can see it, why they would also want to, you know, go the long route and ultimately get to the Brett. There's something satisfying about like it's almost a retelling in a way of Hogan Warrior from WrestleMania 6, where you've got the two big baby face clashing at WrestleMania. Now you're gonna do it. I thought they were gonna do it Brett Luger at WrestleMania 10, but they didn't. Now they have a chance to do it Sean Brett at WrestleMania 12. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And Sean, I mean, it does ultimately work. Because Brett, I mean, by Brett beating Diesel, that gives us the heel Diesel. And that sets up the challenge after WrestleMania. And
Yeah.
meanwhile you park Undertaker with Diesel, Diesel with the Undertaker. So
Yeah.
I think the way they laid it out ultimately works. All right, thumbs up, thumbs down, or thumbs in the middle.
Well, I mean, 15-year-old self, thumbs up, $15, good enough show. Fun show, had the gimmick, liked a couple of matches. 30 years later, I'll give it, not here, but here
I thought you
because
were going to give me the Batista 2005.
nah, we're
Thumbs up.
not going that. It was fine, and an hour and 46 minutes. It
Yes.
breezed. It was easy to go back and rewatch. There wasn't anything that angered up my blood like there have been on some of these other ones we've done.
Yeah.
There were some things that weren't great, but nothing where I'm just like, oh my God, how terrible was that? So it was a fun one to go back and watch. It was better than I was expecting it to be
Yeah.
or fearing that it would be. So Yeah, I think pretty
I'm
good.
gonna go. I'll go thumbs in the middle because I think the ending. I think the ending of the main event brings it down. Like
Sure.
had they ended that a little better, I think you go mild thumbs up.
Sure.
But yeah, the way they paid that off, that's where. But again, I didn't hate the show. Like it's
Yeah.
it's very rewatchable. So
Sure. Yeah.
all right, John, we've talked about what you do on this podcast a couple of times. Just rehash it for everybody and plug your social media.
Yeah. So I do the raw hits and misses for pwtorch.com. I will get to it at some point this week. It usually comes out Tuesday. This year, I've been much better about getting it out Tuesdays. Um, but this has been a crazy week, so I haven't quite gotten finished with it yet. So hopefully it'll be out later today, certainly by tomorrow. And that's just a rundown of the show. What I like is a hit. What I don't like is a miss. What I don't care about, I try to leave off because I don't need to talk about everything.
Yep.
You can follow me at Jon Mezzera at Blue Sky. That is my only social. I got off all the other places, and it's always fun to interact with people. I've got some new wrestling fans that I have made on Blue Sky that I didn't know on Twitter. I've got some people from Twitter that are carried over that I have reconnected with, and it's always fun. And there's some people I think that I used to really enjoy interacting with. Sean was one of them on Twitter. I don't think he's made the jump to Blue Sky, but I always encourage people, hey, get on there too. It's always enjoyable to reconnect with some people I got to know through socials in the past. So that's how you can reach me and follow my stuff on pwtorch.com. Go VIP.
Absolutely. And let me bring that up here for the viewers on YouTube and those those listening on the audio side are VIPs. So
It better be.
Yeah, exactly. But it's pwtorch.com/go VIP. Plenty of options is PayPal, Patreon. So a couple of different ways to sign up. And you get this on the audio side. You get the fix with Todd Martin, everything with Rich Fan, post pay-per-view and PLE roundtables, Radican Worldwide, all kinds of stuff on the VIP feed. All right, John, we'll be back for King of the Ring next month. Look forward to that, and have a good rest of the day, my friend.
Thanks for having me again, Frank.
No problem. And for Jon Mezzera, I am Torch contributor Frank Peteani, reminding you when you are looking for nostalgia, you have come to the right place when we talk pro wrestling then and now.